Welcome to Caregiver Chats. I'm Dr. Lakelyn. Today we'll be talking about 10 resources that every caregiver needs to know. So stay tuned and we'll get into it. Caregiver Chats is a podcast designed to help those caring for older adults find balance, support, resources, and encouragement. If you're caring for an aging family member or friend, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Dr. Lakelyn. I'm a gerontologist and caregiving advocate for Home Instead, an honor company. I know how busy caregivers are, and I'm so grateful that you're taking time to listen. Welcome to episode 3. Last episode, I shared 5 tips to set you up for success on your caregiving journey. I covered a lot, but would encourage you to go back and listen. In today's episode, I'm going to focus on 10 helpful resources that every caregiver needs to know. There are so many resources out there that people often don't know about. And if you start to Google resources, it can be very overwhelming. Hopefully, I can save you some precious time by sharing 10 resources that will change your caregiving game. I would also love to hear from you. What resources have you found to be helpful? My email address is in the show notes. My top 10 resources include things from your local area agency on aging to your faith community, a local lending closet, and so much more. And I'm going to spend time talking about each of these 10 resources. There's also going to be a lot of links in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. My number one resource is your area agency on aging. For starters, you can find your local area agency on aging, we call it AAA for short, by visiting the Elder Care Locators website. You can type in your zip code and find your local AAA, or you can call 211 and ask them to help connect you. Every county in the United States has a AAA thanks to the Older Americans Act that came about in 1973. And these agencies across the country provide a range of services that make it possible for older adults to age in place in their homes and their communities. And during my graduate studies, I did my practicum, which is basically an internship, at the local AAA, and I got to see firsthand the impact that they make in their communities. I loved my time there. My favorite highlight was getting a sneak peek behind the curtain on how they run their Meals on Wheels program. It is incredible how they utilize volunteers to help get hundreds of meals out each week, and actually 5 days a week. Me and my Home Instead colleagues, we share a weekly Meals on Wheels route in our community, and I did that route just a few weeks ago, and I always find it so rewarding, and it takes me back to that practicum at the AAA. Often, Meals on Wheels programs are offered on kind of an income-based sliding scale, so your loved one may have to pay a little bit, but as a caregiver, it can be really helpful to look into these Meals on Wheels programs for the older person that you're caring for, especially if you're working during the day and aren't there to cook for them or the person can't cook for themselves, or if you're a long-distance caregiver and want to be sure that your loved one is getting nutritious meals. Again, something definitely worth looking into. Another favorite part of my practicum at AAA was visiting the various senior centers. And these senior centers offer daily meals, but in addition to that, they also offer activities, exercise programs, healthcare services, and programming like diabetes education, and also probably most important, there's a lot of socialization that goes on at these senior centers. So as a caregiver, the person you're caring for, they might enjoy going to senior centers for meals or social interactions. So be sure to contact your local AAA to get details on where the closest senior center is to you or to the person you're caring for, and some even provide transportation. Also, one more kind of fun fact about the AAAs, they have information and referral assistance programs. It's a fancy name for basically you can call in and ask any question that you have about aging adults in your community. They have a ton of knowledge about the local supports in your area. They offer kind of homemaker and chore services, transportation, case management, caregiver support services, and so much more. So no matter where you're at in the caregiving journey, if you haven't checked out your local AAA, I would encourage you to give them a call, ask them those burning questions, and learn what's available in your area. And some of their programs have wait lists, so the sooner you can call, the better. All right, number 2 on my list of resources is disease-specific websites. And this one might sound a little strange, but many caregivers are supporting someone living with a chronic condition. Thanks to modern medicine, people are living longer with these chronic conditions. On average, 78% of adults over the age of 55 have at least one chronic condition, and over half have 2 or more. The most common chronic conditions are heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, cancer, dementia, and Parkinson's disease. And you as a caregiver might also be dealing with some of these chronic conditions yourselves. We see that caregivers have a higher number of chronic conditions. So you can learn about these specific conditions to help maybe yourself on your own health journey, and they can also help you provide better care for the person that you're caring for. And each of these conditions that I mentioned, they have their own websites with really helpful information. I've included a bunch of links to these in the show notes. So for heart disease, you want to check out the American Heart Association. For diabetes, American Diabetes Association. Arthritis Foundation is great for resources around arthritis. And then when it comes to cancer, the American Cancer Society is a great website, but there are also a lot of sites specific to the type of cancer that the person might have, whether it's prostate cancer or breast cancer. So you can do a quick Google search to find the specific cancer that you might be facing. Also, Parkinson's disease. There's several great organizations that support those living with Parkinson's and their care partners, including the Parkinson's Foundation, the Parkinson's Resource Organization, and Davis Phinney Foundation. Again, links to all of this is in the show notes. And then when it comes to dementia, I just want to clarify quickly that dementia is an overarching term for cognitive impairment that is severe enough to impact daily life. So it's kind of like an umbrella term if you think about visualize an umbrella. And then there are various types of dementia that fit under that umbrella. And so with those types of dementia, there are various resources out there. So for Alzheimer's disease, that's the most common type of dementia. The Alzheimer's Association is a great resource. They have a 24/7 hotline that you can call. And another group is HFC, Hilarity for Charity. It might not sound like a resource for dementia caregivers, but they have fantastic information. They were founded by actor Seth Rogen and his wife, Lauren Miller Rogen. So be sure to check it out. Lewy body dementia is the second most common type of dementia. The hallmark symptom for this type of dementia is hallucinations, and some people develop Parkinson's disease first and then develop Lewy body dementia. And the Lewy Body Dementia Association is a fantastic resource that I would highly encourage you to check out. And a third type of dementia that I'm going to cover today is frontal temporal dementia, or frontal temporal degeneration, FTD for short. It's another type of dementia. If you've been watching the news at all recently, you probably saw Bruce Willis was recently diagnosed with FTD. And so this often impacts people in their younger years. It's the most commonly diagnosed dementia for those between the ages of 45 and 64. So if this is pertaining to you and your caregiving situation, please check out the Association for Frontal Temporal Degeneration. Such a great resource. And most of these disease-specific groups have support groups, which is my number 3 tip on this list of resources. So number 3 is support groups. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some meet in person, others meet online. The pandemic really opened up a world of virtual support groups and online support forums, and they're still going strong today. Support groups can be so helpful in connecting us with people that are going through similar experiences. Many caregivers and care partners express that it's so therapeutic just to listen to others' experiences and know that they're not alone. And it's also helpful to learn from those that have dealt with certain experiences and from those that have gone before them. I actually help facilitate an 8-week support group series that combines education with discussion groups, and it's specific to dementia caregivers. I do this in partnership with HFC. I just mentioned them a minute ago, and my fellow gerontologist, April, co-facilitates with me. And we're actually starting a new session on May 2nd, again for dementia family caregivers. So if you want to join that group, you can find the link in the show notes. Also on Facebook, I belong to a lot of groups for family caregivers. And this is great because it allows caregivers to post to the other group members to comment and share advice and encouragement. And you can really find out what works best for you, whether it's in person or online, but I strongly encourage you to get plugged into a group or a space where you can connect with others. If you join one and think, man, this isn't really for me, I'm not jiving with this group, I don't really click with them, don't give up. Try another one. Sometimes you have to kind of figure out one that's the best fit for you. But the key of a support group is to remember that you're not alone. So plug in and find that support in some sort of support group. Number 4 on the list is your local pharmacist. Why this might seem like an unlikely resource, if you think about it, your local pharmacist is often more accessible than your doctor's office when it comes to medication questions. If you have concerns about the side effects or questions about dosing or timing of when meds should be taken, your pharmacist is a great go-to resource. There's also a few tricks that they can help you with, like arthritis-friendly caps for those medication bottles. Also, they can suggest medication dispensing systems. If your loved one is having trouble remembering to take medications, maybe they have to take one med 3 times a day, you can ask the pharmacist if there's a slow release formula that maybe they could take once a day instead, and then of course run that by the doctor. Or maybe there's a medication that could be put into some sort of a wearable patch. So again, your pharmacist could be your new BFF. Again, they're much more accessible at times than your doctor is, so don't hesitate to reach out to them. The next tip, number 5, we're halfway through, is respite care. And you might be thinking, what is respite? And I'm so glad you asked. The simple answer is that it is time away from the caregiving role. Respite allows you to recharge your batteries. Think about your cell phone. You're probably holding it in your hand or listening via your cell phone. If you're like me, you would never leave your cell phone off the charger at night. That just seems like a crazy thing to even suggest. For me, my cell phone is my lifeline. I need it to be charged and ready to go the next day. And respite is like a charger for caregivers. It's stepping away for maybe self-care or allowing you to get things accomplished on your own to-do list, and it helps you come back refreshed. It can help you be a better caregiver and to realistically help you kind of sustain that caregiving for a longer span of time. And respite care can take many forms. It could be having a family member or friend come over and relieve you of your caregiving duties for a short period of time. It could involve taking your loved one to an adult day center for several hours in a day. It could also be a short-term stay in a senior living community while you go out of town, maybe for a funeral or a wedding, or if you yourself are recovering from a medical procedure. Another common form of respite is in-home care, and that's where you would hire a professional to come into the home, and they can help supplement the care that you provide or fill in when family is unavailable. Home care can be a great support to older adults, and they can help with everything from light housekeeping to meal preparation. They can help with that medication management and even some personal care like bathing and grooming. And many of them provide specialized Alzheimer's care and hospice support. So this service, it's really customizable and is able to adapt to the needs of the older person and their family. And often the care professional becomes an extension of the family. And that's definitely how I felt about Edith. If you listen to the trailer of this podcast, I mentioned Edith and her story. Her family, they were all long distance, and she had home care and I was her care coordinator. She truly became like family to me and to the care professionals that worked with her every day. And again, so the home care provider can become kind of an extension of family. So if you want to learn more about home care, please check out a free downloadable guide. It's a home care guide. We've linked to it in the show notes. There's great information on there, on that guide about, the types of home care, great questions to ask when you're hiring home care, and then information on payment options. I've worked in home care the last 10 years, and so often we get called when a crisis occurs. When someone's returning home from the hospital, there's been a fall. But, the calls that I really, really loved is families that were being proactive and looking into the services earlier, before a crisis. They're getting that kind of respite put into place. And many were surprised when they inquired about all that home care could do to support them. So I would encourage all caregivers to at least look into home care options so you can make an informed decision when it's needed, if it's needed, and when you're ready. So to find out more about all of these various respite options that I just talked about, you can, of course, talk to fellow caregivers and ask for their recommendations. You can do a Google search. You can reach out to your AAA, your Area Agency on Aging, or there is a website called the ARC National Respite Center, and on their site, they have a respite locator. So I linked to all of that in the show notes. And if you're thinking, I don't know about the cost of this type of care, you may be able to find respite grants in your local community or on those disease-specific websites that I mentioned earlier. I know, for example, that HFC has a grant specific to dementia respite care. So again, respite care is a great option that allows you to take a break to help sustain you in your caregiving journey. So it's an important resource to check out. Before I talk about the next resource on my list, here is a word from our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Home Instead, an honor company. If you find yourself needing extra support as a family caregiver or time away from your caregiving responsibilities, Home Instead can help. Our home care services are delivered by compassionate care professionals and range from personal care, meal preparation, and medication management to Alzheimer's care and hospice support. Visit homeinstead.com to learn more and to find a location near you. Veterans Assistance, or the VA, is number 6 on the list. If your loved one served in the military, you'll want to pay attention to this part. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the veteran in your life for their service. When it comes to the VA, there are some nuances in getting support. So don't get discouraged, but it does depend on when they have served and for how long they have served. And this might make them eligible for something called aid and attendance. And even if the person that you're caring for was married or is married to someone who served in the military, they might also be eligible for these benefits. Aid and attendance can provide financial support for services to care for the veteran or their surviving spouse. And services could include home care, support with activities of daily living, or cognitive impairment. The VA also has a great Caregiver Resource Center where you can find resources and a hotline to call for more information. And I've linked to that in the show notes. I do want to say a word of caution. If you Google VA benefits or aid and attendance, you'll notice there's a lot of organizations out there that can help you apply for aid and attendance. Again, it is kind of nuanced, so sometimes it's nice to have that help in applying, but those groups are likely not part of the VA. They might charge you a fee to assist you. So it's really important to do your due diligence. And again, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up on that. Number 7 on the list is your faith community. This is another lesser known resource. If you're plugged into a faith community, you might want to check and see if they have a volunteer program to support the aging members of their community or congregation. Some might have a program to help transport older members to religious services, or maybe they'll make accommodations so that you and your loved one can participate in the services or activities. I remember growing up, my grandma would regularly pick up an older woman in the neighborhood who also went to our congregation, and she took her to services every week. So I know that those kinds of volunteers, they're out there, so it's worth looking into. They might have also volunteers that provide respite or make social visits. And the clergy or community leaders could also be a great source of support for you, the caregiver. Some provide counseling services or support groups. I also know during the pandemic, many faith organizations started online services and rituals, and they continue those online offerings, post-pandemic. So online is another place where you could find support, whether it's through an online service or a spiritual support group. One of my favorites out there is guidepost.com/caregiving. And remember, faith can be a source of strength for you as a caregiver if that's part of your kind of day-to-day life. Many caregivers I work with talk about how faith has been so important to them and a source of, again, strength. So if it's important to you, don't hesitate to lean in. I had a great conversation about this with dementia care expert David Troxel. We talked about spirituality and dementia. So if you're interested in listening more about this topic and my conversation with David, I have linked to that in the show notes. Number 8 on the list is caregiving organizations, and I would encourage you to get plugged into those. There's a variety of caregiving organizations out there. Some are policy and research focused, like the National Alliance for Caregiving. Others are more caregiver-centric with resources and support like Caregiver Action Network. They have actually a caregiver help desk where you can call in or chat with caregiving experts. And then there's the Family Caregiver Alliance that has helpful resources for caregivers in a variety of languages. So if you need a resource in a language other than English, I would definitely encourage you to check them out. You can visit their websites. I've linked to all of them in the show notes. You can also sign up for their e-newsletters and follow them on social media to keep up with the latest information and resources on caregiving. Again, those are great groups to follow. Number 9 on the list is local lending closets. At some point in your caregiving journey, you're likely going to need some form of durable medical equipment. We shorten that to DME, and you might need this for the person you're caring for. This would be things like walkers, wheelchairs, a toilet seat riser, a bedside commode. And if these all sound like gibberish to you, you're probably going to encounter them at some point. But I want you to know that these types of equipment can add up. Most of them are not covered by insurance, so it can get expensive. But what I recently learned is that you might be able to rent this equipment or borrow it from a local lending closet. And my friends Cindy and Christina at Adaptive Equipment Corner have a website where you can search for a local lending closet near you. They also have great helpful videos on their website on how to properly use this equipment. And you can see the link to their site in the show notes. All right, the final resource on my list, number 10, is hospice. And please don't tune out here. I know that end of life and dying and death, they're not fun topics to discuss or plan for. However, death is the great equalizer. There's 100% chance that we're all going to die. Sorry if that's news to you, but it is just the reality that we live in. And actually, a few years ago, Home Instead did a survey and found that people are more comfortable planning for their own funeral than talking about the days, months, and years leading up to it. Wow, if you stop to think about it, more comfortable planning their funeral, that's for when they're already gone. I want to talk about those days, months, and years leading up to it, and I want you all to think about it as well. Hospice, it can also be called comfort care. You might, sometimes in the news media, they talk about it as comfort care. It's actually a form of palliative care, and palliative care can be used at any point in a person's life. But a transition from palliative care to hospice care occurs when someone has 6 months less to live. The focus for palliative, hospice, comfort care, whatever we want to call it, is about improving quality of life. And hospice is especially helpful for individuals in enhancing a quality experience at the end of their life. But unfortunately, hospice is a resource that often goes underutilized. I've heard so many families say, man, I wish we would have used hospice sooner. So I want you to learn that lesson from these caregivers. Don't let that happen to you. Look into hospice and just be open to learning more. What I love about hospice is that it provides a wraparound support for an individual on hospice and for the family, which means you, the family caregiver. The hospice team is made up of professionals ranging from nurses to social workers, bath aides, clergy, and hospice volunteers, and probably more that I haven't listed. But after the individual passes away, they also provide bereavement support for the families who are grieving. While there are a lot of misconceptions about hospice and fears associated with it, I would encourage you to talk with the person that you're caring for about their end-of-life wishes and about hospice as a possible resource for them and for the family. I've linked to an article in the show notes where you can learn more about hospice, and I hope to dive deeper into this on a future episode of this podcast. So there you have it, the top 10 resources that every caregiver should know about. As I mentioned at the start, if you have any additional resources that you want to share, please email me at caregiverchats@homeinsteadinc.com. That's homeinsteadinc.com. I would love to hear from you. I hope that you will tune in to our next episode where I'll kick off a 3-part series about relationships and caregiving. First, we'll be talking about the relationship dynamics of an adult child caring for an aging parent. So if that's you, tune in. In the meantime, I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Home Instead Inc. Again, that's Home Instead INC for previews of upcoming episodes, caregiving tips, and more. You can find all of the links in today's show notes. Thanks for listening, and please remember to take good care of yourself while you care for others. Caregiver Chats is brought to you by Home Instead. If you're looking for in-home care to support you on your caregiving journey, please visit homeinstead.com/caregiverchats to learn more.